Thank you for staying on and watching this presentation. The next section deals with shadow IT, with creating company policies and things that you could do to further secure the network. So it mainly will be geared towards managers, executive staff, owners, and policymakers. So if you're not a part of that, please feel free to exit the video at this time. Although you are welcome to stay, it's never a bad thing to have a little bit more information on a broad range of subjects. And the next section is, again, we're going to start it with shadow IT. Shadow IT is a term used to describe information technology systems and solutions that are built and used within an organization without explicit organizational approval. Now, why is shadow IT becoming a concern? Traditionally, organizations depended on IT departments to set up accounts, install productivity software, create restrictions and policies for the associated services. Today, software as a service allows users to go online, open accounts, and begin using these services with no security, oversight, or policy other than the default policies applied by whatever developer that the software manufacturer is being created by. SaaS creates the illusion that IT is a simple commodity that can be mastered by laymen, much the same way that Legal Docs and WebMD have given many people the belief that they're well equipped to self-diagnose medical problems or tackle legal issues without counsel. Employees with overconfidence in their abilities or lack of awareness concerning the dangers of shadow ITs often resort to SaaS to solve business problems. Some of the examples of SaaS are CRM, mailing lists, contact systems, data storage, project managers, all these things. Documentation, for example, word processors, spreadsheets, even networks. All this can be created online with the clicks of a few buttons. All the hard work is done by scripts, so you don't need to have a lot of technical knowledge. So to give you an example, you can go into your company and you're familiar with a particular CRM package, right? And you used it in your last job. So you come into this new company and they use it something totally different. So you decide to install your own, IT SaaS project there for CRM. So you go online, you sign up for a CRM package. There's plenty of free ones online. And you start to use that to track your customers and track your sales and track your everything. That is an example of a shadow IT project. Another example is a bulk mailing list. You're in charge of marketing, you go to your company, you open up an account with, let's say, MailChimp for your company, you start sending out email blasts. IT department doesn't know about it. That's another example of a shadow IT project. So how easy is it? Okay, if you do a search for a CRM program, you'll see that there's no shortage of free programs or try and then buy programs that are out there that you could just download, easily install, and start to use. SaaS programs are generally easy to use. They require little technical knowledge. They're free or have zero entry costs. And again, if you search for keywords like CRM, you'll see how many there are out there. So what is it about shadow IT and these SaaS programs that make them so attractive? Number one is that they're easy to set up. You can go online, you could sign up using your email, create a password, and in a matter of minutes you could get what's normally something that would be very complicated or to set up behind the scenes. These programs will have all that done for you immediately. Secondly, there's familiarity. There's no need to retrain. Sometimes when you move companies, you're having to use different tools. But with SaaS, you could take your SaaS project with you, and so it's the same tool that you could use from company to company, and there's no need for to learn something new. There's also job security and control for the person that is doing this project, because the person generally owns the project. Sometimes people sign up for SaaS projects with their personal Gmail or Yahoo email address, and then guess what? They own that account. And whatever information's on it when they leave your company, they leave it with them. So there's a job security feature for that. The second thing, the fourth thing, is that there's a level of secrecy, a circumvention of policy, and there's no need for approval. If you're accustomed to using CRM and you go to a new company, they don't have a CRM tool, it might be difficult for you to go and convince the managers to install a CRM tool. So the easy thing would be for you to just go and sign up online and start doing all your CRM through one of these programs, and nobody has to know about it, and you'll be as productive as you've ever been with the same program that you're already familiar with. And the last thing is empowerment and ease of use. What are the implications? Okay. Well, first we have backup, security, and retention. Different organizations have different levels of compliancy that they need to adhere to. And when somebody is doing a SaaS project, you don't know if that project really complies with what is required. So, for example, if you're in the medical industry, you may have HIPAA or other regulations that you need to comply to, and that really tell you how you have to back up the software, how the retention policy needs to be, whether it needs to be encrypted or not, how it could be transported. And these SaaS projects may not have that because the person that's setting them up may not be aware of these types of regulations. So again, it's something that's being set up by non-technical people, and so it may circumvent requirements or with compliancy. Another thing is that generally, a lot of us read terms and conditions, and a lot of us don't. And one of the things that you want to watch out for is employees that are creating, SaaS shadow IT projects don't read the terms and conditions. Sometimes these softwares could work for a month, 6 months, 3 months, and then all of a sudden tell you need to now subscribe. You've used the freeware version for long enough, and at that time you've invested several months work of input and customer notes and everything. So now you're faced with, hey, we have an additional cost that we didn't anticipate of how much it would cost us. So that's something that also has to be looked at when you're using software in the cloud. And in shadow IT projects, like I said, most of the employees just kind of do it in a hurry. They need to get something resolved quickly. They don't read what the end result is going to be, what the cost is going to be at the end. Another thing is these projects, these shadow IT projects that use public mailing campaigns, are they being sent out compliant with current laws and regulations? Most countries have laws against spam, and the way you send out bulk mail, it has to be within the legality of the country. And if you're doing it outside that, you could have fines. And if an employee sets up a project like a MailChimp and they start blasting out emails and it's not within regulations and IT doesn't know about it, you may not find out about it until it's too late. Thirdly, a lot of SaaS projects in the cloud are file repositories. How many people open up their own Dropbox account, their own OneDrive accounts, and then they start putting company data into there? You could share this data with others, okay, and who's controlling the access controls? It's a non-technical user who set this up. So, if they make a mistake and they share a private directory where they didn't mean to, your company data, could be viewed by people that you don't want viewing it. And one of the problems is if it's a shadow IT project and people are storing data that they've created while they're working, the day that they leave that job, they may leave and that data is out of your control. So you'll have no access to that data, because if you didn't know about that project and you don't have the ability to reset the password or to gain control of that account, you might lose whatever work that person did while the person was employed by you. And the final thing is that you got to to see if the provider is mining any kind of data. Sometimes there's a business model where they give you, something for free, but you have to pay for it somehow, and you usually do that by providing access to your data so that they could mine through it and see how they can use it. Okay, now we're going to talk about remote access. A lot of people work from home, and they need remote access to get into their computers or into their networks at work, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. The first thing that I want to mention is that many companies use freeware remote access programs that not only are they easily accessible and easy to use, but they can be set up as shadow IT projects. Shadow IT is where an employee installs a piece of technology or uses some kind of piece of technology without the written or without the known knowledge of the IT department, and it's something that the IT department has specifically allowed or condoned. These become shadow IT projects, and many times an employee will install some piece of remote software like a TeamViewer on their desktop and then go home, and they can access their computer from home and do some remote work. There are two problems with this. Number one is that sometimes when this happens as a shadow IT project, the user is using a home computer that you have no idea the state of it. You don't know if it's got antivirus, you don't know if it's infected, you don't know what they're doing. So it's generally not a good business to allow employees to have to conduct any type of company business or to have any kind of access into any of the systems, whether it's email, whether it's the network, from their home computers, from a non-managed computers, because you have no control over the state of security of that computer. The second thing is, if these shadow projects are unknown, when the employee leaves, this software may stay on the desktop. That access may still be there. So if the employee is vindictive, and nobody knows that this is there, then they might have a way to get into the network after they've been terminated. So this in itself is an issue too. One of the ways that you could deal with that is by making sure that you have a written policy. You can also block these types of programs from being installed on your network, and in general, employees shouldn't even be able to install software on their computers. That should be done by the IT department, and it should be just programs that are whitelisted by the company. Okay, every company has a list of software that you can use. And if you don't have that, then it becomes a problem, because there are just so many pieces of software out there, and everybody likes something different. If you hire people, one person comes from another company and they use this program, another person comes from another company, they use that program. You might have a smorgasbord of programs installed on your network. You lose track of it. And good security requires a level of control, and that means that you have to have some control over what programs are installed on your network. Another thing is that these remote, these freeware remote control programs, or try it and then buy it, they really don't require users to set up strong passwords, and they could set up either weak or moderately weak passwords. You don't know that because you're not the IT administrator in charge of that. You'd have to look through their user terms and conditions and see what their requirements are. And also, employees, when they do this as part of an IT shadow project, they generally reuse a password. They might use the same password to set up a LogMeIn account or a other remote access program that they've used for their LinkedIn account. And that in itself is a security problem. Some of these programs have additional levels of authentication at the desktop layer. So when you try to connect to the computer, it's going to prompt whoever the user on the computer is to allow or disallow. But if that doesn't get set up at the beginning, then the user may come in and have access to the computer without anybody being on the computer console and approving it. So if they've left their job and that computer stays on at night, they could come into the computer, and sometimes people leave their computers on and don't even log off, and if the if the timer to log off the screen is set for 15 minutes and the person gets in at 5:59 or so and logs in right when the user leaves, then they're in with the user's login, and that again, that could be a problem. Also, there's no central authority to keep track of which computers have logged me in, which ones have other programs. So when employees leave, who knows what's on there? We actually scan the network periodically. We use tools to see if anybody has installed and left these programs. Sometimes we do get third parties that need to manage computers, and the users will give them access via one of these programs, but we always ask them to uninstall it afterwards, and we periodically scan your network to see if any of these programs are present. And I suggest that if you have a company where you periodically give people access to remote control programs like this, that you also do scans to make sure that they're not active and being abused. One of the other problems is that data could be exfiltrated. These remote control programs often have file sharing features, and if again an employee is terminated, they could get into this program, and later on, because nobody knows that that's there, they can actually start to exfiltrate data. Some of them, most of them, especially the free ones, do not use two-factor authentication. So there's not that secondary extra authentication step that makes things secure. They could remain in place past the necessary utilization time. So again, nobody uninstalls them and they remain there. What we always recommend is that remote users VPN into their network, and they use a two-factor authentication. And this is very effective because when an employee leaves and you shut down their username and password, well, their access for the VPN generally goes away with that. And also, since all the VPN users are centrally located, when an employee leaves, go into the VPN and shut down their username and password there also. In this article, it details about how TeamViewer and some of these programs have been exploited. And in the case of TeamViewer, it wasn't necessarily a problem with TeamViewer or anything in their security. It was just a weakness of the people that were setting it up. And again, sometimes these programs are set up as shadow IT projects by people who aren't IT managers. They reuse passwords, or they have weak passwords. And in the case of TeamViewer, what happened is people all of a sudden started noticing that their mouse was moving, and they had no idea, who was moving it. And it turns out that some hackers were going and exploiting TeamViewer accounts of people who had simple passwords. Maybe they had the word password, or password 1 or password 123. Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that do that. And so they were able to basically hack these accounts because they used weak passwords, and then they used that to get into computers inside of the people's employment. Also, again, if you're allowing this as a shadow IT project and it gets set up by the user of the desktop, the user may reuse their password. They may have that same password for LinkedIn that they have for TeamViewer, and then that's when things can become a problem. And in this article down here from SC Magazine, again, malicious actors initially access the company's networks using valid stolen passwords for either Citrix or LogMeIn. And this is probably somebody who went online, opened up some LogMeIn accounts. They either used compromised passwords or simple passwords, and that feature was able to be exploited. So always make sure that if you need to use these types of remote control programs, that they are set up by the IT department, they're tracked by the IT department if you need to use them. Discuss remote access with your employees and dissuade shadow IT projects. Create a written policy so that employees know what they can and cannot do, how they should access the network. You might have a policy that states, hey, don't connect to us remotely from a public hotspot or Wi-Fi. Things like that. Every company will have a different policy, but it's important to create a policy, figure out what you want to do, what you don't want to do, discuss it with all the stakeholders, with your IT company, and give that to employees so that they're aware of what's allowed and what's not allowed. And if possible, put physical restrictions. Don't allow them to install these types of programs or block the websites of these types of programs. If you use paid versions of the remote access programs, then they can all be grouped together into a single user interface, and you maintain better control. So when an employee leaves the organization, you can go into there and shut down their access. And this is something that's not possible when shadow IT projects are going on and these programs are being installed freely. Use two-factor authentication whenever possible. This adds a second layer of security and requires that a user either answer their phone or reply with a text that's been sent to their phone, or enter it into the session as an additional layer of security. And what we generally use is RDP or VNC, which are two remote control programs, but we use them over a secure VPN tunnel, and we always recommend using two-factor authentication to establish the VPN connection. Again, convenience versus security. This method is not as convenient as just clicking on a button and getting, pretty instant access to your work computer. This method requires you to open up the VPN session, enter a password. Then it's going to require you to either answer your phone or grab the text message from your phone and enter it into the VPN. Then the once that's established, then you open up RDP or VNC, then you have to enter a password again. So it's kind of inconvenience, but these layers also work to protect you, right? It's sort of like a bank. To get to the vault, you need to go through the security guard in the front, that's layer 1. Then you have the counter, that's layer 2. Then you might have the vault is hidden in some room somewhere, layer 3, and then you have the big door of the vault, that's layer 4. So you can't just walk and the vault is open and it's right there for you to take something out. It's layered security. IT is the same way. Another common shadow IT project is the use of non-company emails to conduct business. Sometimes employees will use their personal Gmail accounts, or they'll open up a company Gmail account. Let's say that you have some restrictions on your email and they're trying to send out a large 30, 40 megabyte email where your server does not allow that size, and they want to get around that. So they create a company called, they create an email account called yourcompany@gmail.com. They start conducting business through that. It's easy. They keep using it. When they leave the company, all those emails, you're not going to have access to them. It's basically in their account. So that's another common scenario that you have to watch out for. And a lot of times people also will have shadow IT projects where they use their personal computers or personal devices, iPads, telephones, and personal PCs to work from home, do designs on their computers, and they store their designs on their hard drive. Well, again, that's an issue, because if they leave the company, that information's with them. Secondly, if those computers are not properly secured and they have a virus or anything, those files could be lost, they could be encrypted, or they could be stolen. So there are a lot of possible implications when implementing shadow IT projects. Employees should be informed about the dangers of shadow IT and urged to consult with management instead of just processing arbitrarily to go and set up something. And shadow IT projects should be disallowed, and SaaS should be discussed by a committee of stakeholders before you implement any SaaS project. So an employee should just not go in there and arbitrarily set something up. There should be a committee. It should be discussed. It should be analyzed carefully before being set up. There should be a process for vetting and approving SaaS projects and preventing shadow IT, and of course you should have a written policy so that employees know that it's not okay for them to just go there and start conducting company business on some kind of online software that they have set up themselves. Cloud-based storage is another common shadow IT project. A lot of people set up Dropbox accounts, other storage accounts, OneDrive, on their own, and they start, sharing company information through those accounts or storing company information without it being known to either the management of the company or the IT department. One of the things that you have to watch out for is, are these being properly secured with access controls? If a non-technical or a non-IT person goes and sets up an account and starts uploading information, starts setting up access controls of who could view it, who cannot, they might make a mistake and make it publicly viewable. And this is a common error that happens. I'm sure you've read in the news where somebody hits an Amazon bucket and they've downloaded a database of whatever, and it's been a big deal. And it's because they didn't properly secure it. They made it accessible to the public. So here's your data sitting out there in a repository in the cloud without properly being secured because it was set up by somebody who's non-technical and really wasn't well versed in how to go about doing these things. So that's one of the dangers of shadow IT projects when it comes to cloud-based storage. Make sure that they're secure, and make sure that they're set up by a competent IT person that has experience doing so. If not, you can make your data accessible to people that shouldn't have access to it. Another thing is, of course, there's always passwords. When you have employees setting up accounts, are they reusing passwords to set up these accounts? If you go and set up an Amazon account, or you go set up a OneDrive account or a Dropbox account, and you use a simple password, or you have a password that you reuse for many other accounts, and that password is compromised, then you're putting that data at risk, because somebody could go in there and get into that account with those reused or compromised credentials and have access to things that they shouldn't have access to. Another common shadow IT project is the use of non-company emails to conduct business. Sometimes employees will use their personal Gmail accounts, or they'll open up a company Gmail account. Let's say that you have some restrictions on your email and they're trying to send out a large 30, 40 megabyte email where your server does not allow that size, and they want to get around that. So they create they create an email account called yourcompany@gmail.com. They start conducting business through that. It's easy. They keep using it. When they leave the company, all those emails, you're not going to have access to them. It's basically in their account. So that's another common scenario that you have to watch out for. And a lot of times people also will have shadow IT projects where they use their personal computers or personal devices, iPads, telephones, and personal PCs to work from home, do designs on their computers, and they store their designs on their hard drive. Well, again, that's an issue, because if they leave the company, that information's with them. Secondly, if those computers are not properly secured and they have a virus or anything, those files could be lost, they could be encrypted, or they could be stolen. So there are a lot of possible implications when implementing shadow IT projects. Employees should be informed about the dangers of shadow IT and urged to consult with management instead of just processing arbitrarily to go and set up something. And shadow IT projects should be disallowed, and SaaS should be discussed by a committee of stakeholders before you implement any SaaS project. So an employee should just not go in there and arbitrarily set something up. There should be a committee. It should be discussed. It should be analyzed carefully before being set up. There should be a process for vetting and approving SaaS projects and preventing shadow IT, and of course you should have a written policy so that employees know that it's not okay for them to just go there and start conducting company business on some kind of online software that they have set up themselves. So what are the hidden costs of these shadow IT projects? When setting up shadow IT projects, many of the people that set them up do not read the terms and conditions, and this can present certain problems. One of the things you have to ask yourself is, will the SaaS services cost increase? Sometimes they give you a limit of the number of days, 30 days that you could use the software, but other times the cap is based on the amount of data. You could keep I don't know, a megabyte, but once you go past the megabyte, then you have to start paying for the software. You don't want to discover this after you spent months entering data and you reach that 1 meg, and then you discover that the price that you're going to pay for this is now going to be exorbitant and it's much more than what you were willing to spend. That's why you want to read the terms and conditions beforehand. And if you allow shadow IT projects, people doing it in a hurry, they usually don't read these terms and conditions. So all these things should be done by a body of stakeholders, and all these things have to be analyzed. Some shadow IT projects may have associated costs. For example, if you're, I know that there's some backup programs that are freeware, and you think, great, I got this free backup program. If you don't read their terms and conditions, what the caveat is that they charge you for recovery. So if you run, it's free as long as you don't need to actually, restore your data. When you restore your data, then they have a per kilobyte or per megabyte charge. And then you might find out that it's going to cost you a lot of money to recover that data. So all these things are things that are generally spelled out in the terms and conditions. So these are things that you need to be aware of before you start investing your time and your effort into these software programs. Also, is your data being mined? If it is, it may not be compliant with regulatory bodies, or even your management or ownership may not be happy that your data is being mined. This is something that, if it's set up as a shadow IT project, might not be taken into consideration. And if there is some kind of data breach of the company that stores that data, what are going to be the costs, who's going to be liable, all this may be spelled out in the terms and conditions. Most companies will hire employees and have them sign non-disclosure agreements so that private information within the company is not shared with others. When you have a shadow IT project, you have to look at, like I said, most people that set up shadow IT projects are not reading the terms and conditions. And sometimes these terms and conditions state that the data could be shared with third parties. And, that's something that it's usually overlooked. And, you have to ask yourself, first of all, is it going to meet regulatory requirements? If the provider that's offering some free repository for your CRM, where you keep your patients or something, is that going to be okay with HIPAA? Other regulatory bodies such as FISMA for the government, CTPAT, for the shipping industry or the warehousing industry, they have their sets of regulations too. And employees that are out there using free products, sometimes these free products, the reason that they're free is because they data mine. And that data mining may not be within compliance of things like HIPAA or FISMA. BYOD, bring your own device. It's a type of shadow IT project if it's unauthorized. Some companies allow BYOD, and it's acceptable. I always recommend that you fence it from the rest of your network. If employees want to use their personal laptops or their personal phones or devices within your infrastructure, I always like to create a separate zone for those devices. It's a non-secure zone where these devices can live and not touch your internal secure zone, your internal network. Okay. And that way, if somebody brings a device that's infected with some kind of malware, it has no chance of getting into your secured section of your network. But basically, BYOD is also used in shadow IT projects. USB memory sticks, if you don't need them, I would definitely have them blocked from your network, because employees could exfiltrate data on USB memory sticks. And they can also in many cases, trying to be productive, trying to help out the company. They take work home with them, but sharing that stick between a home computer and a work computer could lead to your work computer becoming contaminated if their home computer is not properly secured and may contain a virus. Same thing with USB drives. Webcams, people bring cellular hotspots into work, sometimes to override security, and this is this is an issue because, well, first of all, when you have all these hotspots that people can connect to, you never know. One of those hotspots might be a rogue, as you can see in this image. Okay, sometimes what hackers do is they'll go close to an office space or something and they'll create a dummy rogue access point that has no security restrictions and it has no connection restrictions, so anybody could just connect to it. So people think, oh, this is great. I'm able to bring my home laptop to work, and I connect to this hotspot that I found. Somebody must have forgotten to put a security key on it, and I can surf unrestricted. Whereas in my workplace, I have surfing restrictions. If they use that laptop to then conduct company business and log into your CRM package or your email or any other services, and that is being, as you can see right here in this picture, it's being sniffed out. All that traffic is being sniffed out. That employee may be compromising his or her passwords that belong to your company assets. So there's things that you could do about this. I'm not going to get into them in this particular presentation, but again, it's policy, making sure that your employees do not bring personal devices into the workplace without IT knowing about it and having properly secured those devices. Also, IoT devices are becoming very common, and they're not the most secure devices. If you've been reading the news, they're not the most secure devices around. A lot of them lack some very basic security. IoT devices could be anywhere from DVR cameras to webcams. I've seen companies where they start installing IoT devices to monitor refrigeration temperatures, and they connect these things to the corporate network, or they do it through shadow IT projects, and again, without the knowledge of the IT department, these things could be a risk. How can you avoid shadow IT? Provide easy to use and comparable systems so that users do not need to go outside of the traditional business approved software to get the job done efficiently. So if you provide efficient tools to your employees, they will not need to resort to shadow IT. Provide written documentation to employees explaining the process for requesting and using SaaS so that they just don't go out there and do it arbitrarily. Explicitly prohibit using SaaS without procedural approval. Create an approval process for all SaaS that takes into account real cost, security, availability, and confidentiality. So do your homework, make sure you know what you're getting into, okay? And have all stakeholders included into this approval process. And use hardware and software controls to find and detect users of shadow IT. Actually, to stop shadow IT projects, okay, that are being done arbitrarily. You could do this in a variety of manners. You could block access to SaaS sites that are not specifically approved by your company. You could disable device usage for employees that are not approved so that they cannot bring in their home laptops and connect them to your network. You can disallow software installation and administrative access on devices so that users cannot just install software on their computers. You could prevent unauthorized devices on your network through network policy servers or some type of either MAC address filtering or some other type of hardware filtering. You can identify rogue access points and hotspots using rogue access detection, and of course you could monitor employees' network usage and see if they're using SaaS shadow IT projects. As I had mentioned earlier, security is multi-layered, and in this section we're going to discuss some of the layers that you can add to have better security in your workplace. first, using an intelligent firewall or universal threat management device is very helpful. These devices, generally what they do is they'll scan all incoming traffic from outside your network. So any web surfing that gets done, any data that's transmitted, anything that goes through your gateway, okay, will be scanned, and you know, any kind of malicious code that's found is going to be blocked at the gateway level. If you have an Exchange server or some kind of email server on site, it's also a good idea to have the traffic from this device go through a firewall gateway filter that scans for threats. And these firewalls, generally it's a subscription base where you pay a yearly fee, and to have this traffic sniffed as it's coming in and out of your firewall. And it's a great first line of defense security that you can incorporate. And a lot of the better firewalls have UTM capabilities. We generally use SonicWall, but there are a lot of other good brands that have the same capabilities out there. So again, security is a multi-layered approach. So one of the other good things that you could do to secure your network is to create trusted and untrusted zones. Secure zones, unsecure zones. As you can see in this image, okay, we have a secure zone here in green where we have Wi-Fi access, and we have as well as we have cabled access, okay? And this is a zone where the devices are managed, everything has antivirus, everything is company owned, it's a secure zone. Then in every company you always have people that come in, they want to use your Wi-Fi, they want to connect to your network, you have employees that have BYOD devices. Create a separate zone for them, okay? And in this case you see here this yellow area, that's the unsecured zone. This is a zone where you could tell your BYOD users, hey, connect your laptop to this Wi-Fi here, okay? Connect your unsecured device, connect your DVR cameras, connect your IoT devices to here. Because if something happens here, okay, because you have these devices that are more out of your control, okay, it's not going to be able to get through and into here because you have a firewall in between them. So creating these zones is key. If you could do it with here they have a multi-router scenario, but you could do it with a single router. Just create separate zones within the router, use separate physically segmented networks. And of course you want to protect this by having either MAC address filtering or DHCP filtering so that somebody can't just come in and plug in their device into your network and get access to it. They need to be whitelisted. Use VPN and two-factor authentication whenever possible. A VPN for external access or remote access into your network, and two-factor authentication as well as an added layer of security. And always follow best practices. There are a lot of best practices out there that people don't follow, and you know, this should be dictated by the level of security that you want to implement. But if there's what's called a baseline best practice, and you should follow that. And if you're not sure what that is, you can kind of just do a little bit of research online, or ask us, or ask whatever IT management company you have. They should already be implementing that baseline best practices anyways. Okay, when it comes to computer security, it's always good to be paranoid. And I just put a copy here of Andy Grove, one of the founders of Intel, wrote a book titled "Only the Paranoid Survive." When it comes to IT, especially when it comes to emails, okay, having a little bit of paranoia is good because it'll keep you on your toes. Create a written policy so that employees understand what constitutes acceptable use. Do not allow unqualified personnel to modify computers, install software, or surf unrestricted. Always use the principle of least privilege for access control. And this principle of least privileges, basically what it states is that you don't grant people broad access and then start cutting them down. You do it the other way around. You grant them as little access as possible and then give them access as they're needing it. So for example, you don't give them access in a scenario like a network share. You don't give them access to the whole folder and then say, okay, I am going to disallow you. I'm going to cut off your access to the accounting or the financial section. What you do is you don't give them access to any of those folders and just go in there and think, okay, what do they specifically need access to? Oh, they're in the warehouse department. All they need is warehouse access. That's it, and maybe public. Okay, so you start with the least amount of access as possible and then add access as it's required, not the other way around. Okay, and also do not allow employees to create folders and repositories where they're going to store any type of private information. They should call us and have us create those folders and lock them down. And in the case where these folders are located in the cloud, again, you should have us create those folders and lock them down for you. Okay, again, following the multi-layered approach, if you have email server, that should run through your gateway scanner, and that's your first level. Your second level should be that email server should be blocking files that are generally associated with malware anyways. You shouldn't have executables going through your email system. You shouldn't have zip files. You shouldn't have a variety of other files like Office files, Word, Excel that have macros. Those things should not be allowed through your email system, because then what you're doing is you're putting the onus on the employee to know the difference between a fake mail and a real mail, and if they open up an Excel file that's macro attached, they could get the virus. And it's just in every company there's a variety of people. There's financial people, there's warehouse people, there's management people. Not everybody's an IT person, so you don't want to put the burden on them to figure out on each and every email. You want to give them as much information as possible, give them this cybersecurity training to prepare them, but ultimately understand that they're not IT people. They're not in this business. They don't do this day in and day out. Okay, so you want to give them as many tools as possible, but also take the burden away from them as much as you can. And by blocking unwanted file attachments, you're helping out the process greatly. Back up to NAS or to some type of removable system, whether tapes or drives or whatever, but something that could be rotated and taken offline. And have your employees take a cybersecurity course at least once per year. And any new employee that comes into the organization should be, as part of the policy, they should go to this video and see this video in its entirety. Okay, so that if they come into the company midway through the year, they don't have to wait another 6 months before they take the cybersecurity training. They could at least see the video and get a heads up right away. And again, be alert, educated on the defensive. A little bit of paranoia is not bad, because it'll keep you on your toes. Don't get complacent. Don't rush through things. Think everything through when dealing with computers and emails and security systems. Thank you for watching this presentation. If you're one of our clients, we urge you to contact us. This presentation can be had live and on-premise once per year. And it includes questions and answers, and it's a lot more interactive, a lot more interesting than just sitting here and watching a video. And we urge you to please schedule a cybersecurity training once per year to make sure that your employees are well aware of some of the threats out there.